The pursuit of the Stanley Cup. Which one of these two teams will be hoisting the cup for the first time? Will it be the Vegas Golden Knights or the Florida Panthers? Each franchise lacked a lot of believers this past season along the way, but they are here in the Cup final.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everyone. Tony Cordasco here from Las Vegas. I am at the Park MGM Hotel, just a few steps away from T-Mobile Arena, and that'll be the site of games 1 and 2. I am from Locked On Golden Knights and here in Las Vegas, and Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers joins us from Florida, and this is a special edition, our crossover edition on the Locked On Network. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. And, of course, you could find us wherever you get your podcast. And we are on Twitter, myself at Tony Cordasco, at Locked On VGK, Locked On Golden Knights, if you are watching us on YouTube. And he is at Mondo Man, at LO_FLA Panthers, and Locked On Panthers NHL. That's an awful lot. Mondo, we've talked along the way ourselves here during the course of the season, and never in our wildest dreams did we think that we would be here with the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, it's funny because listening to even the different Locked On shows and of course some of the ad breaks in between the ad locators and of course the Locked On Sports Today using a first-time Stanley Cup winner, and then using my quote from a recent episode saying that I didn't envision that the Florida Panthers would be playing hockey on June 1st. But here we are. The Florida Panthers are in the Stanley Cup Final for their second time in franchise history, and the Vegas Golden Knights have an opportunity to win their first Stanley Cup as well, being their second time in franchise history as well. And It's crazy because something has to give between these two teams, because the Vegas Golden Knights have taken down 4 100-point scorers in Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Jason Robertson, 4. And they're looking to get another one in Matthew Tkachuk, while the Florida Panthers are on the quest to beat the top 4 out of 5 in the NHL if they are to win this series.
And so we're breaking this down today in 3 parts. The first one is the biggest storylines. You've already started on some of the storylines. And what are some of the key players to watch for? That'll be our second segment. And then we will also have our predictions. VGK fans, I have a love and hate relationship with all of them, with my predictions, my picks for each series. I've gone against VGK, Mondo, in each and every series. So while VGK won the division, and it had the best regular season in the NHL's Western Conference. The Florida Panthers, meanwhile, they were the last team into the playoffs. And what a Cinderella story this has been for the Panthers. What is the biggest storyline, do you feel? What if you had a choice, what would you say is the biggest storyline heading into the series against the Vegas Golden Knights?
It's funny because this is a Cinderella story, but it doesn't feel like a Cinderella story all at the same time, if you know what I mean, because this is a team that won the President's Trophy last year, but of course they had quite a bit of turnover in the offseason. Of course, they have embraced the role of underdog, or in the Florida Panthers case, undercats for this whole playoff run. And of course, bringing in Paul Maurice as well after everything that happened with Andrew Burnett taking over as the interim coach just 7 games into last season, getting them to the President's Trophy, and then getting swept by the Tampa Bay Lightning. And of course, something had to change. The style of play had to change for the Panthers. Bill Zito didn't think that they could win with Jonathan Huberdeau, and made that big trade for Tkachuk. And of course, there's a lot of dead cap on the roster for the Florida Panthers, and it also for the players who have been here since the beginning, the guys who were drafted here like Barkov and Ekblad, it took them a little bit to even get to the playoffs. It It took them until 2016 because Barkov was drafted in 2013. Ekblad #1 overall in 2014. Of course, that was also a new ownership change too at the time too. And of course, bringing in Jaromir Jagr at the time to get them to the postseason. Of course, they lose in 6, but then they plateau for a few years. And of course, coaching change as well. But of course, unforeseen circumstances and things out of their control with Joel Quenneville. And of course, with now making this coaching change with Paul Maurice, and of course, let's not forget a GM change too. And Bill Zito, he's in year 3 of being with the Florida Panthers, and really starting to make this team his own team, really, because there's only 3 players left from the Florida Panthers from the Stanley Cup bubble, and just this team had to go through growing pains of learning, of getting to work with new players and get to work under a new system as well, changing their system as well, because they're not that same rush team that created so many goals, who broke so many regular season records over the last 20 some odd years. But this is a more of a create on broken plays and trying to be responsible in their own zone. And it's really come to fruition in the postseason. Of course, let's also not forget that the Bobrovsky contract was considered a bad contract for the first 4 years of it, and it really hasn't paid off until now.
Yeah, $10 million a year for Bobrovsky. We have coaches, of course. Paul Maurice goes from the west to the east, and then we've got South Beach Bruce Cassidy. Cassidy goes from the east to the west. For the Vegas Golden Knights, I think the biggest storylines, Mondo, pretty much, how VGK got here to this point, how they've improved each and every series, and how it really has become a team effort this year, more so than relying on just one player or a superstar. That superstar, of course, could be Jack Eichel, but he was injured, and he's given up a lot of his offense to play defense. VGK disposing of Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Dallas along the way, and they come off perhaps their most convincing victory. Cassidy said that was the best victory of the season, the 6-0 win in game number 6 in Dallas, and they just dominated there. And who knows if that's an omen of things to come. And again, this is the first postseason for Jack Eichel, and he is the leading scorer for the Golden Knights, despite not scoring a goal in the last series. Ivan Barbashev has been a player, I think, game after game consistently that has really helped out, and he digs up the loose pucks, and he does a lot of the dirty work for that top line. Jonathan Marchessault with 9 goals. William Karlsson, as you know, Vegas Bjorn, #Vegas Bjorn, one of my favorite players of all time. He has 10 goals, and they've stepped up, and again, for VGK in Florida, I have to also believe a lot of the focus will be on the goaltenders because it's been a goaltending carousel here in Vegas, and hopefully the Vegas Golden Knights can still get that same consistent play. Hopefully for you and the Florida Panthers, Sergei Bobrovsky can continue to play at his level. But when I looked at, the numbers and broke things down, Mondo, you could see where for VGK, Aiden Hill, 7-3, 2.07 goals against average, and a .937 save percentage. And you're talking about a goaltender that was perhaps the second or third man in the line. Logan Thompson gets injured. He goes down. Hill gets a lot of playing time. And then you have Laurent Brossoit. We call him Brossoit here in Vegas. And then he gets injured. He goes down. Jonathan Quick is acquired. He's a backup. He got shelled a couple of games like we thought he would. And so I think we're going to see a lot out of the goaltending position coming up in this series. Coming up next, we've got key players to watch. This is our crossover edition. It's the quest for the cup. It's the Locked On Golden Knights and the Locked On Florida Panthers. Back with more right after this. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime, the Gametime app, has a lot of deals on tickets right up until the day of the event. And currently, right across the street from where I'm sitting right now at T-Mobile Arena, the lowest price tickets were $437. But of course, hang out there at Toshiba Plaza, listen to Little John, and maybe you'll get a deal on all your tickets. Of course, the Gametime app, it definitely helps us out a lot. You always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You can get images of your seat right before you buy them, buy tickets in a matter of seconds, and tickets are sent directly to you and to your phone, so you never have to go digging through your emails. So we have a special offer for you. If you download the Gametime app today and create an account, just use the code LOCKEDON NHL, that is, for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the redeem code off the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked Golden Knights. Tony Cordasco, Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers. And this is not a team from Florida. It's actually a team that plays in Sunrise, Florida. Can you explain the differences? I mean, what is it, about 20 or 30 miles? I keep saying Miami, but you had to correct me, I know, on Twitter.
33 miles to be exact from downtown Miami. So West Broward County, where right behind Sawgrass Expressway, all you see is wetlands there, and it's across the street from a mall. And then if you take I-75 north, all you see is land. If you're heading towards Naples, Fort Myers, Estero, but then most of the action is out east for downtown Fort Lauderdale and all that. So it's like around 20 minutes east Fort Lauderdale is from Sunrise, Florida.
Okay, so today was media in Las Vegas, and because Chris had asked him about VGK and what he felt the Golden Knights would think of his play and all the fans, and he said, they're going to hate me. They're going to absolutely hate me. So let's talk about some of the top players, some of the key players. And do you feel, I have to ask you, Mondo, do you feel that the Florida Panthers have an edge in physicality in this series?
I mean, Radko Gudas is a consistent top leaders, not only on the Florida Panthers in hits, but also in the NHL as well. And him along with Sam Bennett are two guys who are definitely bring the physicality for the Panthers as well. And of course, Tkachuk with what he can do after the whistle as well. And I mean, he got into it with Brett Burns in the last round too. So yeah, definitely not afraid to lay out some hits there. It's as far as impact players, Matthew Tkachuk, of course, is one of them. Of course, leading the team in points, third in shot on goals behind Brandon Montour. And Sam Bennett in second best in shooting percentage, right behind Sam Reinhart, who he's going to face his former teammate. So they played like 300 some odd games together, him and Jack Eichel there as well. So that's a great, that's a big storyline as far as teammates. Unfortunately, the storyline of former teammates playing against each other is not going to be Patrick Hornquist and Phil Kessel, as both of them are not playing in this series, it looks like. But Barkov is another impact player for the Panthers of what he does on the defensive end with back checking, just like how Jack Eichel does with the Vegas Golden Knights, and really didn't pick it up offensively until round 3. And of course, I want to see how it's also matched up with Mark Stone as well, as both of them were in the Selke conversation in 2021, and third in points right behind for Hagee and Tkachuk. And third one is Bobrovsky. We talk a little bit about the goaltenders, but I'm not really too much of an analytics person, but goal save above expected for Sergei Bobrovsky is at 19, while Aiden Hills is at 6.4. And the next closest guy is Igor Shesterkin at 8.4, I believe, and he got eliminated in round 1. That's just amazing. But also, what's at stake? On the document that we saw right before we hit record, it talked about what's at stake for certain players. And this is the first time I'm mentioning this on the show. I've thought about this in my head. And of course, with how Bobrovsky has performed ever since coming into game 3 and then starting in game 4. And it's crazy because his numbers are the way they are, even though he didn't play a great game 4 against Boston. But had a great breakaway stop on Brad Marchand in Game 5 in round 1, and then Marty Necas in Game 1 in the third period. That just crazy to think that 3 hours later they would come out with that game winner in quadruple overtime, which the Vegas Golden Knights have also won their fair share of overtimes in Games 1 and 2 in the Western Conference Final. But what is at stake for Sergei Bobrovsky? And this is the first time I'm mentioning it: the Hall of Fame, because he's a 2-time Vezina Trophy winner. And right now, for the Florida Panthers, he's the Conn Smythe leader for them in how he's performed. And it's crazy because how Bobrovsky has played, especially on the penalty kill. The Florida Panthers gave up 11 power play goals in round 1. Since then, they've only given up 4. And how they played at even strength really carried them in Game 1 against Carolina, especially with Sergei Bobrovsky going 55 of 55, and then helping the Panthers and keeping them in the game. And then Matthew Tkachuk scores 3 game-winning goals and then assist on the other one to Sam Reinhart in Game 3 in that 1-0 win as well. And then the other one is Carter Verhaeghe and as well playing on that top line with Sasha Barkov, what Barkov can do at the defensive end, and then with Verhaeghe and Duclair go on the rush the other way. I mean, even if it's like a 3-on-2, Carter Verhaeghe can shoot it from the circles as well, and he's a really sharp shooter. So those are the 4 impact players for the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, and for VGK, of course, you talk about former Florida Panthers. We've got Jonathan Marchessault here in Las Vegas, and we have Riley Smith, a couple of players that are major contributors and former line mates on the Misfit line. And okay, so I know you have your Heat hat on there as well. And so would you say Bobrovsky, this will be his series to prove his worth to get into the Hall of Fame the way Eric Spoelstra, I think, has proven his way into the Hall of Fame? Is that fair?
I guess it's fair to say, and it's crazy when you think about both the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Final, how the Denver Nuggets were coming off a whole bunch of rest, and then how the Heat were grinding out in a 7-game series, and then you could say the same thing about the Stanley Cup Final with the Vegas Golden Knights going to 6 games. I said that I didn't care who the Florida Panthers faced. Part of me wanted the Vegas Golden Knights to win Game 5 just so that Game 1 could have started on May 31st instead of this big wait. But if it was going to extend past 5, let it go to 7. But of course, unfortunately, you had the worst case scenario with it ending in 6 and this wait for the Florida Panthers. But hey, they're 5-0 coming off a break of 5+ days since the start of training camp, and outscoring their opponents 29-11. So rest is not going to be an issue for the Florida Panthers here.
VGK has done a number in 5-on-5 throughout the first 3 series, and that could be a trend that continues. And then also, we heard from Aiden Hill at Media Day, his favorite player that he modeled his game after, Roberto Luongo. Mm-hmm. Pretty cool. For VGK, I mentioned earlier, Jack Eichel. I think everything starts with Eichel, even though, again, when he's always, to me, the best skater on the ice for the Vegas Golden Knights. He's the best player. He's the best player that can get things started on the rush. He finds teammates. He had an unbelievable backhanded assist to Jonathan Marchessault in the last series. And I think, again, he's become a much better defensive player, leads the team with 18 playoff points so far. And this coming after he and South Beach Bruce, because he gets that one-day tan in Florida. I don't know how, but they met up in Cape Cod before the start of the season over last summer, and this is what Cassidy wanted to see out of Jack Eichel. He's responded so well. Some of the other players that you need to watch, for some reason, William Karlsson scores 14 goals during the course of the regular season, and then comes to life, has 10 goals in the postseason, and is a much different player. And Jonathan Marchessault currently with 9 points. The fourth line, VGK had a lot of hop in that last game against Dallas. And one of the reasons why was because they put Nick Waugh back in the centering position on the fourth line. Keegan Colasar scored. Hey, I got to tell you, Mondo, if William Carrier scores not 2 backhanded goals like he did in the last series, if he scores 1, then everything is going well for the Vegas Golden Knights, because that's a guy that tried the backhanded shot like all of the entire season, and it never went into the net. But again, we mentioned Aiden Hill, Mark Stone, very quiet the last playoff series. And you can find Stone, a very unselfish player, currently on the third line. They'll mix up a lot of what they do. You'll see, again, a lot of the lines, checking lines that the Florida Panthers put out there on the ice. And then, so Stone is the captain. And Alex Pietrangelo, defensively, I just have to talk about him. He plays the most minutes for the Vegas Golden Knights. It's him and Alec Martinez that are paired defensively. At times, they play really well. At times, they don't. But Pietrangelo could be a scoring threat, especially on the power play. He likes those point shots. He has 1 goal. He has 8 assists over the course of these playoffs. Coming up next, we will break down the Stanley Cup Final Series. We will also have, I know everyone's waiting for it, our predictions on the road to the 2023 Stanley Cup. I'm Tony Cordasco from Las Vegas. He is Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers. Back with more right after this.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to our crossover edition. Tony Cordasco of Locked On Golden Knights, Armando Velez, Locked On Panthers. And coming up on Saturday night, it's all on the line. Game number 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. Do you have any key stats or anything that you want to point out? Any of the keys coming up in this series between VGK and the Panthers?
As far as stats, I think what has made the Florida Panthers so successful is how they start periods and how they end periods. And here's an interesting stat. I don't know how it is on the Vegas Golden Knights side, but first 3 minutes of a period and then last 3 minutes of a period, the Florida Panthers have 17 goals in the first 3 minutes and the last 3 minutes combined throughout the whole entire postseason. And they are coming out hot. They are probably very amped up in the locker room as well. And of course, if you've seen the docuseries Quest to the Stanley Cup, you see a bone in their mouth, and which is actually not a dog bone. It's actually a bone from a steak that Mark Stahl might have still spilled the beans at media day when it comes to that. So highly recommend that documentary, The Quest to the Cup. But yeah, 17 goals in the.
Hey Mondo, is the rest of that steak in his beard?
No. I didn't see it from the video, at least from the first 2 that I've seen. Actually, the 4th one came out. I still have to watch that. So definitely want to check out on ESPN Plus. But yeah, and also I think the Florida Panthers do have the special teams advantage here as far as how they're converting on the power play. Their penalty kill has progressed throughout the postseason. They've just gotten a lot better. And of course, a few under the radar. I want to talk about some under the radar players for the Florida Panthers. Gus Forsling is definitely getting his opportunity as the top pair defenseman. Of course, with Uyghur being traded to the Calgary Flames in that Jonathan Huberdeau Tkachuk deal. And then how is he going to defend the Vegas Golden Knights when they're on the rush, especially because they're a great rush team, especially when they're 5-on-5 and the Florida Panthers, if they make a mistake on a pinch. Sam Bennett on how they are on the forecheck as well, where the Vegas Golden Knights are very quick to get the puck out of their own zone. So I'm interested to see how the Florida Panthers take their chances and how aggressive they are there. And you mentioned the 4th line in the last segment. Here's an interesting stat that I saw from the Vegas Golden Knights of Carrier, Waugh, and Colasar. Even though they're outshot attempted 29-30, the Fenwick stat, which is unblocked shots, they lead +9 in that category. 27-18 of shots that are not blocked to the net. So they are getting bodies up front. So I'm also interested to see how the 4th line goes against the 4th line of Lomberg, Stahl, and Colin White. So, and also Anton Lundell, he's been pointless in the last 6 games and started to come alive in the second round series against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And of course, he's playing with the line that Etulis Strain is more of the defensive forward. Sam Reinhart is a sniper / net front presence as well. So I'm also interested to see how Anton Lundell if he was to come alive, because he is viewed as the future 2C of this Florida Panthers team, and has of course had his sophomore slump in the season, but started to come alive. But also interested to see how he pairs up with the third line of the Vegas Golden Knights as well.
Yeah. And, another player that I did not talk about defensively, Zach Whitecloud, is plus 12 currently for VGK. So that's a player that is just helping things out and might not contribute on the stat sheet, but he's on the ice when VGK scores. And Jack Eichel, in games that he scores a goal in, I think now there's something like 7-2. I believe in games, or 7-1 in games that he's scored a goal or at least a point. So Eichel is definitely someone you have to, again, keep your eyes on. For VGK, they cannot turn the puck over. The 24 turnovers in game number 5 against Dallas, uncharacteristic of this team. And that's something that they really need to work on, puck, fight for the pucks. That Bruce Cassidy says is vital, is that VGK keeps fighting for pucks and plays hard. And special teams, as you mentioned, Mondo, I think Florida does have an advantage. But here's something that's really interesting that I dug up. Florida draws a lot of penalties, and VGK was one of the least penalized teams in the National Hockey League. And so something has to get there. I think that's a real interesting stat. I think slot battles on both ends of the ice are going to be really important, and I think that's something that concerns Bruce Cassidy as well. And then in my unsung hero X Factor category, your Conn Smythe winner, if VGK wins this series, will be Ivan Barbashev.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable. I mean, he's got 15 points. No one mentions him. Again, one of those trade line acquisitions for VGK, comes over with the pedigree from St. Louis up before, and he's got 5 points in 17 games in the playoffs. And so that, and he sucks in the corners and forechecking and doing all, like I said, a lot of the dirty work for VGK. I think the Golden Knights too, Mondo, might have an edge in cup experience. I think there are 3 players, right, on the Panthers that have cup experience. And here in Vegas, we've got all sorts of players from Alec Martinez to Alex Pietrangelo, Barbashev, a lot of players that have Stanley Cup experience. Chandler Stevenson, of course, on the cup winning, we know that Washington team that came here to Las Vegas and beat VGK 4-1 back in 2018. How do you think, like, the media and the fans in South Florida what is their perception of the Vegas Golden Knights?
I can only speak for myself as far as perception of the Vegas Golden Knights. But hey, they're embracing. They're saying their mentality is, because they were able to beat the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins and of course beating the high powered Maple Leafs power play as well. And then, of course, the strong defensive team in Carolina as well, who they took the lunch money of Brett Burns and Jacob Slavin, that pair, especially in that series. They think that this is still a big challenge for the Florida Panthers, but a lot of people view this team as a team that can play with anyone in the postseason as well. So that at least that's the consensus that I see from. And I don't buy the whole story about when people talk about, oh, the expansion rules favored them, or you know what? It's bad management by teams around the NHL. I mean, the Florida Panthers are definitely the pure example of that. And honestly, also with that, when it comes to LTIR as well, it works if you can put it in your favor. Do it. I mean, the Florida Panthers were able to activate Anthony Duclair because of LTIR as well, and also they were able to sign Eric Stahl because of Aaron Ekblad going on LTIR early in the season, because Eric Stahl did not start the season with the Panthers. He was on a PTO, and then he was released from it too. And because of that salary cap space that they had, they were able to get Eric Stahl back into the organization after being there in training camp too. So I don't really necessarily buy those stories that people want to say about VGK. I mean, yeah, and listen, Mark Stone on the other side, I mean, he's been hurt a lot through the last few years, but man, when I broke it down on yesterday's show, how when he's in the lineup, he definitely elevates the game of Chandler Stevenson as well. Even though Chandler Stevenson has been up and down the lineup from top line to third as well. So definitely a big challenge ahead for the Florida Panthers as well. And like you said, Cup experience. Mark Stahl been to a Cup, but he didn't win one. Eric Stahl went to a Stanley Cup in his second year and won with the Carolina Hurricanes. Carter Hagee was playing in a minimal role with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then of course signed with the Florida Panthers for free. Of course, funny enough, Jonathan Marchessault was with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then they got him in a signing, and then of course what happened in the expansion draft as well. So a little bit of correlations here with both of these teams as they are fighting for Lord Stanley's Cup. Also, one more note about the goaltending situation for both teams. This is the first time that two goalies are facing in the Stanley Cup Final that did not start the postseason since 1969. So right. Very interesting storyline there for the goaltenders.
And Hill was 1-1 against the Florida Panthers, and especially that's a crazy stat in and of itself, because VGK had that goalie carousel. And by luck of the draw, Aiden Hill faced the Panthers twice this season in both meetings, which is crazy. And then, I was looking at the runs there and the streaks. And so Aiden Hill stopped at one point 58 shots in a row. And Sergei Bobrovsky, correct me if I'm wrong, was it 65 shots I think he stopped in a row? Mm-hmm. And so when these goaltenders get into a zone, watch out. And I think the hotter goaltender will be the eventual winner of this series. It is time, Armando Velez, Locked On Panthers. It is time for your prediction. Who takes home the Stanley Cup?
Well, hold on. So I'm gonna start this by saying, in the first two series with the Florida Panthers against the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs, I did not pick the Panthers in either of the series. And then right after they defeated the Toronto Maple Leafs, they made me a believer and saying, wow, this team is bought in. This team it's not always the team that is the best team record-wise. It's the team that's hottest at the right time. And it's crazy, even though a lot of people like to talk about them being in only because of the Pittsburgh Penguins losing to Chicago Blackhawks. But, there's 82 games to nitpick at, and that's not one to nitpick. It just happened to be at the end of the season. But the run that they went on after, it's just the goaltender's hot. Matthew Tkachuk is hungry. Alexander Barkov is that quiet leader who's really on the scene for the NHL. You can no longer put the underrated tag on him, but I picked the Panthers in the last series against the Carolina Hurricanes. I picked them in 6 to win, and they exceeded my expectations. And the Panthers are right now, they've won 8 straight road games. The only road game that they've lost in the Stanley Cup playoffs was game 1 of the Boston series. And they are 2 wins away from tying the LA Kings of 2012. And this has so many correlations to that 2012 LA Kings roster, where Jonathan Quick, of course, who's on the Vegas Golden Knights now, had that run. Of course, relating Anze Kopitar to Alexander Barkov as well, Drew Doughty to Aaron Ekblad as well. But I'm a believer in this Florida Panthers team. I think that I think that they are going to take Lord Stanley's Cup for the first time in franchise history, and it's gonna South Florida is really should be shown as a staple for hockey lore, because I mean, look what happened with the Tampa Bay Lightning the last 3 years of making it to the Cup, and look what the Panthers have built in 4 straight postseason runs, and this region is really hungry for a winner. And so I'm going to say Panthers in 6, and I will be at games 3, 4, and 6. And if there is a Cup clinching scenario on the road, you might see me in Vegas.
That would be great. We'd welcome you here. And, I think we're both on a similar path in that you had a big quote. I had a quote about Vegas being a team of destiny, because each and every night it's a different player for the Vegas Golden Knights that has been stepping up. And they're winning games late in contest. Same thing, I think it's the same route as the Florida Panthers to some degree, although VGK often overlooked. Again, they won the Pacific Division. They won the Western Conference, both regular and postseason titles. Think about that. And here, even in the last series, overlooked, and even by me, I've got to admit. So I've gone against VGK the last 3 series. Each series, I picked against them. And now the fans are mad because my latest prediction on the Stanley Cup, on the final, is I have the Golden Knights. They're thinking that I'm going to jinx VGK. I've got the Golden Knights winning this series in 6. And I am by no stretch a homer. Far from it. I'm very critical of this team and ownership. I like a lot of the players. I don't like some of the others. And we'll have to see how this shakes out. But I think that this could be, for sure, a tremendous series. And we are looking forward to it. And when Bruce Cassidy, South Beach Bruce, when he arrives back there, can you go share some of his trade secrets on how to get that Insta-tan?
Hey, I have one myself, so I definitely can help out Bruce Cassidy. Hopefully it's in a losing effort.
Mondo, you're the best. It is so great to catch up with you. Again, either the Florida Panthers or the Vegas Golden Knights will take home the Stanley Cup for their organization for the first time ever. Things are set, and we appreciate, again, Armando Velez. Thanks for making us your first listen out there each and every day, especially our everydayers. We sure do appreciate you on our podcast and on our YouTube channels. You could find me at Tony Cordasco. The co-host of my show here in Vegas is Chris Golick, who covered Media Day really well earlier on Friday, and he is at TD Chris G. You could find us on Twitter at Lockdown VGK, Lockdown Golden Knights on YouTube, and Mondo, you are at Mondo Man and at
Mondo Man 12. Mondo Man 12.
Mondo Man 12. I missed that. Okay. And at LO_FLA Panthers, right? Correct? Mm-hmm. And then also Locked On Panthers NHL, right? On YouTube?
On the YouTube, yep.
Okay. We appreciate you. Great to see you. Hopefully we'll see you here in Vegas later on in the series, and we'll definitely catch up and do this once again. For Armando Velez from Locked On Panthers, I'm Tony Cordasco in Las Vegas for Locked On Golden Knights, and we appreciate you tuning in to the road to the 23 Stanley Cup.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steer Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And every dayers, make sure you come back for Sunday's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It will be a post-game edition of the show as we break down Game 1 between the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights. So I'm Armando Velez with Tony Cordasco, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.